Welcome to Red Flags and Real Love, hosted by Virginia McConnell, dating and relationship pattern coach, specializing in narcissistic abuse recovery and someone who has lived everything she teaches. This show is about recognizing the patterns that keep us stuck, leaving what's hurting us, and rebuilding into something real. Here's your host, Virginia McConnell.
Welcome to another episode of Red Flags and Real Love. So today we have someone special here. I have Mia Hanks with me, and she is a survivor of narcissistic abuse who actually is an author of a memoir who speaks a lot of her own story. Super excited to have you here. And how are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Super excited to hear your story. It's pretty amazing to write a book about your life, and I mean that seems really difficult, actually.
Yeah, definitely. It was an interesting experience. I actually surprisingly found it to be very therapeutic. I wasn't expecting that, but definitely therapeutic, and retelling all of these stories and things that happened, I just felt like it was somewhat of a release.
I've actually heard that with the survivors that I talk to with the Jane Doe series that I do on my podcast. So it definitely says something to be able to share your story out loud with others. And also, I think getting validation in that also, and seeing that other people can relate to your story. And are you finding that?
Yeah, I am. When I was going through this, and it took me so many years to realize that I wasn't the problem, that I was actually married to someone with narcissistic personality disorder. I didn't know that for so many years. And then when I finally put the pieces together and realized it, I still kind of felt like I was the only one. I thought, this is really strange. Like, I bet a lot of people wouldn't understand this or don't know what this is all about. I've been so surprised to hear how prevalent this is, what an issue this is right now, especially. And I have been, it's very validating to talk to and hear from other people who are really in the same situation that I was in. It's just a lot more prevalent than I realized.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's true. And I'm super curious, how did you know for sure that your ex had narcissistic personality disorder?
It's real interesting. I saw red flags very, very early in our relationship. I ended up married to him for 29 years. It was a long marriage to somebody with narcissism. But I really didn't know until probably the last year that I just started, I was the victim of gaslighting and all of these things that people that with narcissism, do to their victims. And so it really did take me a while to put the pieces together. When I finally started doing my own research and really understanding toxic relationships and just doing the deep dive, and I came upon narcissism and the DSM and the 9 criteria. It was like my whole world suddenly made sense. I had been searching for these answers for what felt like an eternity. And when I finally made that connection, I'm like, this is it. It was almost like someone had been spying on my life, reading those 9 descriptions on the DSM. It really, like I say, it just opened a whole new world for me and gave me so much validation. My ex-husband is not formally diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder. As a narcissist, he believes nothing's wrong with him. So that's kind of the issue. These people often don't get diagnosed because why would they? They are perfect in their minds. But he is an absolute textbook case. You have to have, I believe, 5 of the 9 to be potentially diagnosed. He has very solidly 8 of the 9 traits, probably 9 of the 9. There's not a doubt in my mind.
Can you share with us those 9 traits if you can remember them?
Yeah, I don't off the top of my head. I mean, I know it's a lot. It's a lot. Basically, these people, they have no empathy. They tend to believe that everyone is jealous of them and want what they have. They feel like they are the most important person in the room and only want to associate with people that they deem important as well. They more or less don't care who they step on to get ahead. And they're not afraid to take advantage of people however they need to do. But the real big thing is that they have no empathy. I mean, that's kind of the biggest red flag, and probably the first red flag that most people who have been with a narcissist will probably say that they saw. And that was definitely my case. But again, there are 9 of these traits. That's just like 4 or 5 right off the top of my head. But definitely, if you think you may be with a narcissist, it's certainly worth your time to check out the DSM and read through those traits. It's quite interesting.
Yeah, and I think that it says a lot that you said you were married for 29 years.
29, yes.
Wow. And it wasn't until the last actual year you were together is when you really started seeing things?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was seeing things all throughout the marriage,
okay.
But I was convinced that, I must be the problem. That's what he was telling me. You're the source of all of our issues. You're not capable. You're not smart. You're not this, you're not that. And I believed him, which seems crazy. I look back now and I'm thinking, how did I believe that? But this whole thing starts slowly. It's not one day you wake up and you're being abused. You realize you're being abused. It's such a slow burn. And so, yeah, over time, I really did believe him. He was the smart one. He was the one that had all the answers. And he said the problem was me. And I knew our relationship didn't look right. I knew that something was up with him. He was very off. But in the early days, the early years, I really wrote it off to personality quirks, and I just thought maybe things will get better. If I just hang in there, if I be the best wife I can be, maybe things will get better. Of course they didn't. And it wasn't until that last year I was so desperate. I was just falling apart physically and mentally. And I really started seeking some answers.
Yeah. So you're saying your body and stuff, you started getting symptoms and breaking down, and
yes,
yeah. I've heard that quite a bit.
Being in that fight or flight all the time, which is really where I found myself. Our bodies are not meant to stay in a state of fight or flight, and dealing with all of that stress, the walking on eggshells. You hear about that with narcissists. That's so true. It's so true. You never know what's going to trigger them. And, in an effort to keep the peace, I put myself under a lot of stress, and that stress eventually gets to you. And it did to me: headaches, stomach aches, anxiety attacks, chronic pain, really years of that, you do start to fall apart.
And so after you got away and you divorced and you really started, you're more into healing. I think it's a lot easier when you're separated, when you're separate, obviously, and it's a lot easier to get your nervous system regulated. How long have you been working on that, and how are you feeling now? How long has that been?
So when I left, it took me a year to file for divorce. I was petrified of what his reaction was going to be. It was a scary time, really. And so I ended up in therapy. I did weekly therapy for a year. Before I finally felt like I was healed enough to take that step to file those divorce papers. So yeah. And then the divorce itself was very dramatic. And that took almost a year. So, and I've been divorced now for 2 years. So all in all, I've been away from him for 4 years, but only divorced for 2. So it's still pretty fresh.
Yeah. And are you, I'm just curious, are you interested in dating at all?
Right now I still feel like I'm working on myself. And what I'm enjoying most about my life now is just the freedom that I have. I never thought, in my younger years that it would be, I never thought I would be so excited about being free, and most people don't think about that. But when I wake up in the morning, knowing that I can spend my day how I want to spend it, I can make my own decisions. I can decide how I'm going to spend my day and what I'm going to do. That is so exciting to me. And I never want to take that for granted. So yeah, right now I'm just relishing in being free and just, being my own person.
Oh, I love that so much for you. I love that. And so when did you start writing your book?
Right after my divorce was final, during that whole period, I had been seeking out as much information as I could find on narcissism, narcissistic personality disorder, and everything that I found. It was great information, but it was a lot of stuff that was really written by therapists and psychologists, and it just felt very academic. I was really seeking an insider's point of view. I just wanted to know what someone else who had lived through this, what that looked like. And I really couldn't find it. And so after my divorce, I thought maybe a memoir would be helpful to maybe other people out there who are living this same miserable existence that I was. And, maybe those stories and that validation might help somebody realize, yeah, this is what I'm going through. And I don't need to stay and I don't need to live like this.
Yeah, I think that's so universal across everyone who has gone through something similar to your situation. And people, I hear that over and over. It's like a pattern almost. And I'm really I'm thrilled that you wrote a book about this and you're getting it out, because that's something I keep hearing. There's not enough information, and it's very surface level in my opinion. It's like, red flags. We all know what red flags are now. I think we all pretty much know what love bombing is, and which is amazing. Like, that's big steps. So that's great. But also at the same time, I think they also get abused a little bit, where it's like,
overused. Yes.
Yeah.
Overused. I think with my book, really my aim was to show what day-to-day life looks like with a narcissist. So like you say, we can read the list of red flags. We all know about love bombing. We all have heard the term gaslighting. It's easy to read through those things and think, oh, that's not me. I'm not being love bombed. I'm not being gaslit. Again, it's academic. I think that if people see, get a glimpse into what does day-to-day life look like, not just the big dramatic moments, but those little things too. Mm-hmm. I think it's more, people can resonate with it more if they see what it looks like inside the home, on the daily.
Yeah. And that's what makes, especially like covert narcissism, where
yes,
it's very, very hidden and meant to be that way. It's just really difficult.
Yeah, covert narcissism, that is my ex-husband. He is a covert narcissist. And that really is considered one of the more dangerous types of narcissism. The reason being that everybody on the outside thinks this guy is great. He's charming. He's generous. He's so empathetic. He's just so kind. And that's the view that the world sees. That's not how he is behind closed doors. That's not his true self. So it's very hard for the victim to garner enough support when everybody thinks, your husband is great. He's father of the year, and you want to say, no, actually he's not. But the problem I had during that time, and I'm sure other people out there in this position can also relate, I was helping to perpetuate that lie. I will admit it. I wanted people to think that we had a good life. I wanted people to think that I had it all together. I did not want everyone thinking that my marriage was falling apart and I was falling apart and I was miserable. So I think, in an effort to say, hey, I'm good, I'm great, everything's great, I feel great. And I'm perpetuating the lie. I'm saying, he's a great husband. It's really hard then to go back and say, well, actually, he's not. And actually, he's abusive and he's manipulating and he's controlling. Who's going to believe you? So that's a tough one.
It is. And it's crazy how common it is. Yeah. That's, every victim of a covert narcissist specifically is exactly that, where they think that no one's going to believe them, or, they're literally on their own because they just don't get enough support.
Yeah.
And, no one, I've unfortunately heard this a lot and have had some experience personally. And I think that's absolutely the most dangerous, because you just don't see it for what it really is. And it eats away at you. And sometimes it's like backhanded compliments.
Yeah.
Like as simple as that, where you're like, wait, that just didn't feel good. But then you start second guessing it and you're like, well, maybe I'm just like overthinking it, but it still didn't feel good, So then you might approach that person and be like, hey, like what you said, it just didn't feel good,
Right.
And a lot of times that's when you'll kind of find out the real intentions when you bring something that's bothering you to someone like that. And if that's the case, a covert narcissist will turn it around exactly what you were saying and say, well, obviously, you're seeing it wrong.
Right.
You don't, and then you start thinking that like, oh, well, maybe I am seeing it wrong. This is obviously like, I'm just not seeing it for what it is. And so you start second guessing everything about yourself. And that's when you start just losing yourself.
Yeah, definitely. And my, that certainly happened to me. My ex-husband is very, very wealthy. And so I would get all the time, look what I can give you. Look at this life that I've given you. And there's stereotypes too. I think, people from on the outside looking in say, wow, you have it all. I mean, you're living in this big house behind gates and you have nice cars and you have all this and that, and your life is perfect. And it's sort of like, they're almost reinforcing, not meaning to, but what he's saying, I'm giving you all this and you should be so grateful to me, and you just start second guessing yourself and you think, well, maybe I'm not being appreciative of what I have. Like I'm really lucky to be living this kind of lifestyle. But then at the same time, I'm miserable, So it was a really tough spot to be in. And all the time he's in my ear saying, no one else could give you as much as I'm giving you. And you start to ask yourself, but do I want this? Is this worth it? And in the end, I decided, no, it is not. I would much rather have peace than everything that he could give me. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you were talking to someone who thought that they had a friend, let's say, who they were questioning like their relationship, like how would you approach them? Is there like, just from your personal experience, did anyone ever come to you and approach you? Or if someone did or didn't, how would you have wanted them to, or how did they do a great job at that?
So the only people that knew what was actually going on in my home were my parents. And yes, they did approach me many times. And every time, like the true victim that I was, I defended him. Oh, you just don't know what a stressful job he has. And, oh, he just had a bad day at work and he's not always this mean. And, you're not giving him the benefit of the doubt. And yeah, that's how I handled it. I knew they were right, but I also knew that I needed to keep this marriage together. Why? I don't know. But that was my aim, was to keep it together, keep the family together, So yeah, they did approach me, and I think at the time I just wasn't ready to hear it. I think if you have a friend who is in a similar situation, the best advice I can give you is you have to be patient. I mean, the victim has to figure it out for themselves. They have to make that decision. The day will come when they say, I can't do this anymore, but you can't force someone to see what they're not ready to see, unfortunately. And that kept me in my marriage for 29 years. Looking back, I wish I had gotten out way sooner, but, that's not how it played out. And for a multitude of reasons, I ended up staying way longer than I should have. So it is hard when you are watching somebody in this kind of situation, because there's only, there's only so much you can do.
Right. And yeah, it has to be completely on them, and they have to see it, because if you start pushing that, then you're just going to push them away.
Yes, I agree.
That's just an unfortunate situation, because you want to help them as much as you can. And, I think all of us have been in a situation where we've seen a friend that could possibly be in a situation like that. And, you really don't know what to say.
Right. I mean, and you don't want to intervene. Like with my parents, they wanted to be really careful, because I'm telling them, oh, I'm so happy. They knew I wasn't. But, at the same time, they're like, well, we don't want to meddle if she really is happy and this really is what she wants, So you just don't know where that line is, and how involved you should get.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. So can you tell me more about your book, is there anything that you want to kind of highlight and talk about?
Yeah. So like I said, I really wanted to use it to show what day-to-day life was like. Basically, I start from, the early days of dating. And I go, it's just a chronological series of short stories. And I go all the way through to our divorce. And, I think it just illustrates how this happens, how it snowballs, and how someone can get trapped in one of these marriages before they even realize that they're being trapped. I have a picture of a birdcage on the front of my book, and I describe it was, I was basically being put in a cage, and I didn't even realize that I was the one helping to build that cage. And so, that was that book. And then just in this past April, I released a follow-up memoir. I kept having people ask me, what happened then? So you got divorced, you left him, you're on this healing journey, then what? And so I decided to follow it up with a memoir of my healing journey. And it's called I've Made Plans. And it's all about what happened next. So, so that was fun to write. It was, just kind of reflecting back on where I was at the time that I walked out of that divorce court, which is basically where the story begins, and how that's kind of evolved and what the things I've learned about myself.
Ooh, I just got goosebumps. Oh, I love that. I love that so much. I didn't realize that you had this second follow-up. Memoir.
It just released in April. So
cool. Very cool. How can our listeners learn more about your books and you?
I have a website. It's miajhanks.com. And on that website, I have links to podcasts. You can listen to podcast interviews, and obviously a link to both books where you can purchase on Amazon. They're both available in paperback and ebook format. And then I just put both of them recently on Kindle Unlimited. So if you have Kindle Unlimited, you can read them for free.
Oh, super awesome. Thank you so much, Mia, for coming on the show. I really appreciate you being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. And I actually can't wait to read your memoir. I'm really excited. So.
Oh, thank you. I hope, I really hope the right people find these books that, can really use this information. I just hope it helps somebody out there.
Absolutely. Keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
That's it for this episode of Red Flags and Real Love. If anything Virginia talked about today resonated with you, visit breakthepatterns.net and join the free class every Monday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It's free, it's live, and it's the best place to start. And if you enjoyed this episode, please leave a quick rating wherever you're listening. It takes 30 seconds, and it genuinely helps the show reach more people who need it. See you then.